It all kicked off with one sentence that changed everything. "Hey, would you mind taking your plate up to your room tonight, Margaret? We've got people coming over and honestly we could use a little privacy." Nicole said it real casual, like she was asking me to pass the salt, but it hit like a ton of bricks. I just froze right there in the middle of my own kitchen, knife still resting on a tomato I'd picked from my garden not an hour before. The light above the counter I'd sanded and refinished myself, years back after my husband passed, bounced off the wood and for a second I couldn't move. Every square inch of that kitchen had a memory baked into it. Birthdays, Christmas mornings, packed school lunches, lazy Sunday coffee. So yeah, I set the knife down, didn't say a word, grabbed my plate, and walked myself down the hall to my room. That hallway had never felt so long, no cap. I sat on the edge of my bed with a plate of food going cold in my lap, and the silence just sat there with me until one thought finally landed. Somewhere along the way, I'd turned into a guest in my own house. My name's Margaret Whitfield. Everybody calls me Maggie. I'm 69, retired after 30-plus years teaching third grade. And I'm the sole owner of a modest little two-story on Larkspur Lane, a quiet street just outside Portland. It's nothing fancy. The trim needs a paint job every few years, the gate sticks after a hard winter, and the backyard's just big enough for the vegetable patch that's been my pride and joy for almost 30 years. But every board, every window, every flower bed, that's decades of honest, hard-earned work. My late husband, Walter, and I bought that place when our son Daniel was barely 3. We grinded through the mortgage on 2 regular paychecks for years. After Walter passed from a heart attack 12 years back, I kept making the payments solo until the place was fully mine, free and clear. I figured that house would always be my safe corner of the world. Turns out I was dead wrong. It started about 2 years before that dinner incident, on a chilly October afternoon when Daniel called me up sounding way too upbeat, that nervous kind of cheerful you learn to spot instantly as a parent. He explained rent was through the roof, daycare was bleeding them dry, inflation was kicking their tails, and he and his wife Nicole needed somewhere to crash while they saved up for their own place. "Just a few months, Mom, promise?" I didn't even blink. He's my kid. I drove him to soccer practice at 6 a.m., quizzed him before every big test, held him together after his first breakup, cried happy tears at his graduation. When your kid needs help, you don't run the numbers, you just say yes. 3 weeks later they rolled up with a U-Haul, a mountain of boxes, and my 4-year-old granddaughter Chloe, whose grin could melt an iceberg. I'd already gotten everything set up. Fresh sheets in the guest room and Chloe's room decked out with cute curtains, a pile of storybooks, stuffed animals, even a little step stool by the bathroom sink so she could brush her teeth without help. Those first few weeks? Honestly pretty great. The house had noise in it again. Chloe chasing butterflies through my garden, Daniel manning the grill on weekends, Nicole thanking me over and over for opening the doors to them. I really thought we were building something good. Summer showed up with warm nights and a garden full of ripe veggies. That garden became my escape hatch. Tomatoes went wild that year, cucumbers and peppers and basil and beans right behind them. Out there nothing had changed. That patch of dirt was still all mine. One afternoon while I was tying up tomato vines, I heard laughter drifting out from the kitchen window. Nicole had a couple friends over for lunch. Didn't bother me that she was hosting. What got me was finding out only because I overheard voices I didn't recognize. Nobody mentioned company was coming. I just stayed outside till they left. When I finally went in, dishes were washed, table wiped down, like the whole afternoon happened without me existing at all. Stung more than I wanted to admit. Still I kept quiet. Silence had become easier than a confrontation, or so I told myself. One evening Chloe wandered into my room with a coloring book. "Grandma," she asked, innocent as can be, "why do you always stay in here?" That question caught me completely off guard. "I like it in here," I told her. She frowned. "But this is your house. Kids see straight through the stuff grown-ups spend months pretending not to notice." Before I could say anything else, Nicole called her from downstairs, and she hugged me and skipped off. I sat there afterward, stuck on those 4 little words. This is your house. Was it, though? Legally, sure. Emotionally, I honestly wasn't sure anymore. I'd convinced myself dodging conflict was the same thing as kindness, that giving up my comfort was generosity. But real kindness shouldn't require somebody to disappear inside their own life. I didn't see it then, but I was giving up way more than rooms and furniture. I was giving up my own confidence, and once that starts slipping, getting it back is a whole lot harder than people think. By late August, my own house didn't feel like mine anymore. I'd fallen into a routine that looked fine on paper but left me feeling like a ghost. Mornings in the garden, afternoons reading in the sitting room, evenings behind a closed bedroom door while life carried on downstairs without me. I barely questioned it by that point, which honestly might be the saddest part of the whole thing. One warm Thursday I brought in the best tomato harvest of the season, bright red and glowing, basil smell filling the whole kitchen as I set the basket on the counter. Cooking always settled me, and that night I wasn't planning anything fancy. Tomato sandwiches, a simple salad, some soup I'd frozen earlier. I started slicing veggies, and for a few sweet minutes it genuinely felt like my kitchen again, like the old days with Walter cooking beside me while Daniel did homework at the table. Then Nicole walked in. Barely glanced at what I was making before swinging open the fridge. "Oh, Margaret," she said, casual as ever. "My coworker and her husband are stopping by tonight." I smiled. "That's nice." Then she hesitated. "We were kind of hoping you wouldn't mind eating up in your room tonight. We'd love a bit more privacy for dinner." No yelling, no attitude in her voice, and somehow that made it land even harder. I looked around at the cabinets I'd picked out, the hardwood Walter and I laid ourselves one summer, the table where generations of birthdays happened. Every corner of that room held a piece of my life, and somebody was asking me to clear out of it. I looked over at Daniel standing near the hallway. He'd heard every word. Part of me hoped he'd laugh it off. "Mom, don't be silly, of course you're staying." Instead he just looked down. His silence said plenty. Without another word I set the knife down, grabbed my plate, and walked myself back down that hallway. Nobody stopped me. Nobody said sorry. I shut my door, killed the lights, and sat there in the dark while my food went cold and the tears finally came. Wasn't about eating alone. It was about finally seeing in full color exactly how far things had drifted. It didn't happen overnight. It was one small given after another. One shuffled cupboard, one swapped photo, one quiet dinner, one swallowed complaint, until getting kicked out of my own kitchen started to feel almost normal. Around midnight I still couldn't sleep. My mind kept drifting back to my classroom days, teaching kids about respect and speaking up for themselves. Whenever some kid grabbed another's pencil or talked over somebody, I'd tell them, "People can't respect boundaries you never bother setting." Said that line for 30 years straight. And somehow I'd completely forgotten to live by it myself. Near sunrise I made tea and took it out to the back porch. Garden was dead quiet, dew still sitting on the tomato vines, birds hopping branch to branch like nothing in the world had shifted. But everything had shifted for me anyway. For the first time in ages I stopped asking myself how Nicole got so comfortable calling shots in my house, and started asking a harder question instead. How did I let it get this far? The answer wasn't pretty. I loved my son. I wanted peace. I didn't want my granddaughter growing up around constant fighting. So every single time something bothered me I just stepped back. Told myself I was protecting the family. Truth is, I was slowly erasing myself. That hurt worse than anything Nicole ever said to me. Later that morning I called up my oldest friend, Diane. We taught together nearly 20 years and stayed tight after we both retired. I laid the whole thing out for her. She let me finish without interrupting, then hit me with the same straight talk she's always given me. "Margaret," she said, dead serious, "this stopped being about dinner a long time ago. This is about your home, your dignity, your future. Keep sitting on it, and you'll spend the rest of your life asking permission to live in a house you spent decades paying for." Those words landed heavy. For the first time in months I realized I didn't need another excuse. I needed an actual plan. And before that week was out, I'd taken the first real step toward getting back not just my house, but the confidence I'd let slip away without noticing. Diane's words stuck with me long after we hung up. For months I'd been banking on patience fixing everything, telling myself if I just waited, Daniel and Nicole would eventually save up, find a new place, and life would snap back to normal on its own. But normal had already slipped away, one small surrender at a time. Waiting wasn't solving a thing. It was just making it easier for everyone to keep believing the setup was working fine. Next morning after my tea, I looked up a local attorney who handled housing and family property stuff. Hands shaking a bit as I dialed, still feeling guilty, like I was somehow betraying my own family. when really I just didn't know any other way to protect myself anymore. The attorney, a steady, patient woman named Patricia Lane, had me walk her through everything from the start. She let me talk without cutting in. I told her about the late dinners, the moved-around belongings, that creeping feeling of not being welcome in a house I legally owned outright. When I finished, she sat quiet a second, then asked one simple thing. "Margaret, what do you actually want?" Nobody had asked me that in a long, long time. I stared out her office window before answering. "I want my home back. Not an argument, not payback. I just want to feel comfortable walking into my own kitchen again." She smiled. "Then that's exactly where we start." She explained that letting family stay indefinitely without clear terms tends to spiral into messy emotional situations, and she recommended I set firm boundaries with a written move-out timeline so everybody knew exactly what came next. Wasn't harsh advice, just practical. It reminded me setting boundaries isn't rejection, it's basic self-respect. Together we drafted a formal notice giving Daniel and Nicole 90 days to find another place. Carrying that envelope home felt weirdly heavy, and not because of the paper, because of everything writing on it. That evening I found Daniel alone in the living room after Chloe had gone down. First time in months I walked in without hesitating and sat right in my favorite armchair. Moved his work bag off the seat first, set it on the floor. He noticed. Small gesture, but it reminded both of us that chair had always been mine. "So," he said carefully, "what's up?" I handed him the envelope. He looked confused unfolding it. Then his face slid from curious to floored. "You talked to a lawyer?" "I did. You didn't even come to me first." I took a breath. "Daniel, I've been trying to tell you without words for almost a year." He looked lost. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means every time I stopped using my own living room, every time I ate dinner alone, every time my stuff quietly disappeared into the basement, I was telling you something was wrong. You just didn't catch it." Room went dead silent. "I never wanted you to feel like that," he finally said, barely above a whisper. "I know. That's exactly why we're here now." I looked him dead in the eye. "I love you more than you'll ever fully get. Nothing on those pages changes that. But love shouldn't mean one person has to vanish so somebody else feels comfortable." He dropped his head. "I honestly thought everything was fine." "I know you did. That's exactly why we're here." Neither of us said anything for a bit. Then he finally asked what I figured was coming. "Do you actually want us to leave?" I squeezed his hand across the table. "I want you to succeed. I want my granddaughter happy. But I also want to wake up feeling at home in my own house. I've spent way too long pretending I couldn't have both." Right then Nicole walked in. Felt the tension immediately. Daniel just handed her the notice without a word. She read every line before looking up at me. And for the first time since she'd moved in, her confidence just evaporated. "I didn't realize you felt this strongly," she said quietly. I answered honest. "Neither did I." Nobody raised their voice. No accusations flying. Just an uncomfortable truth finally out in the open. Impossible to ignore anymore. The weeks after weren't easy. Meals got quieter, conversations shorter. But something unexpected happened too. Daniel started spending real time with me again. Some evenings he'd join me out in the garden after work. Other mornings he'd brew coffee for both of us just like back in the day. Small stuff, but it reminded me that under all the tension he was still my boy. And maybe, for the first time in a long while, he was starting to actually see the loneliness I'd been quietly hauling around. The 90 days flew by faster than I expected. Even though things stayed a little tense around the house, something real had shifted. We were talking honestly instead of just pretending. Daniel and Nicole spent evenings hunting rentals, meeting with agents, crunching numbers. Wasn't easy. Rent was brutal and decent places were hard to come by. There were moments I wondered if they secretly blamed me for the whole mess. Maybe they did. But I'd hit a point where I couldn't keep shouldering everyone else's feelings while ignoring my own. One Saturday afternoon Daniel knocked on my door. "Mom, got a minute?" I looked up from my book. Course. He sat across from me looking wiped out. "We found a place." Neither of us said anything for a second. "It's not perfect," he went on with a small smile. "Smaller than we hoped, but it's close to Chloe's school and we can actually afford it." Relief hit me, not because they were leaving but because they finally had something that was truly theirs. When do you move? 2 weeks. I smiled. I'm happy for you guys. He nodded, then said something I never saw coming. I'm sorry. Those words just hung there. I should have noticed. Should have asked how you were doing. I figured you were fine since you never complained. I took his hand. I didn't complain because I thought staying quiet was helping. Wasn't fair to expect you to read feelings I never actually said out loud. His eyes filled up. I still should have seen it. Maybe, I said gently. But families don't get stronger by figuring out who's to blame. They get stronger when somebody finds the nerve to change. First time in months we hugged without any weirdness in it. Felt like getting a piece of my son back. Nicole shifted too in those final weeks. One evening she walked into the kitchen carrying that ceramic bread box, the one that sat forgotten in the garage for so long, and set it down carefully by the kettle. I think this belongs here, she said. I looked at the little painted bird on the lid and smiled. It does. She hesitated. I'm sorry if I made you feel unwelcome. I honestly thought I was helping tidy up. Didn't realize I was slowly erasing parts of your home. I appreciated her being straight with me. Neither of us pretended the past didn't happen, but forgiveness doesn't need pretending. Sometimes it just means not dragging yesterday into tomorrow. Moving day landed under a bright September sky. Boxes filled the hallway again, same as they had almost 2 years back. Except this time the whole vibe was different. Chloe ran room to room hugging everybody she could catch. When she wrapped her little arms around my waist, I knelt down. You'll still come visit me, right? She grinned. Every weekend if Mommy says yes. I laughed through actual tears. My door's always open, sweetheart. After the truck pulled off down the street, this unfamiliar quiet settled over the house. First time in ages I stood there completely alone. I walked through every room slowly, living room, hallway, kitchen. Nothing physically different, and yet it all felt brand new. That night I roasted a chicken, baked some potatoes, made a fresh tomato salad from the last of my garden haul. Set the table with cloth napkins, my good dishes, one lit candle. Some folks might have called that overkill for one person eating alone. I called it a celebration. Sitting by the open window, cool September air drifting in with the smell of basil and fresh dirt, the house finally felt at peace. Not because it was empty, but because it wasn't uncertain anymore. Over the following weeks I put every misplaced thing right back where it belonged. Family photos back up on the mantle. Walter's decorative bowl back on the coffee table. My grandmother's bread box back exactly where it always sat. Every morning making tea, I'd catch it out the corner of my eye and smile, remembering something I'd nearly let myself forget. A home isn't just walls and furniture and a deed with your name on it. It's the place where your voice actually counts. Looking back, I don't think anybody set out to steal my home from me on purpose. We all just made small mistakes along the way. Daniel figured I'd speak up if something bugged me. Nicole mistook my silence for me being okay with everything. And I mixed up self-sacrifice with actual kindness. The real lesson here was never about property, it was about boundaries. Love without boundaries turns into exhaustion. Generosity with no limits turns into surrender. And peace bought by making yourself invisible? That's not peace at all. These days my house is full again. Not with permanent tenants, but weekend visits, birthday parties, holiday dinners, and the sound of my granddaughter laughing through room she still calls Grandma's house. And every night when I sit down at my own kitchen table with a warm cup of tea, I remember the promise I made myself. I'm never shrinking down again just to make space in a home I spent a lifetime building. Because everybody deserves to feel at home in the place that's actually theirs.